Hi, welcome to my channel. I've been making more videos than I normally do. Just things have come up and I've been able to do it, and the topic has been there. I made a video yesterday on the existence of God and my argument for it, and I received a comment from someone. Shout out, thank you for leaving a comment. It's Phil Hart, and I'll read his comment. The existence claim of God of the God of the Bible is a legitimate question for scientific study. The attempts to dismiss the scientific worldview is nothing but a red herring. So thanks, Phil, for that comment, and I'll respond. Um, I don't think that I wouldn't say do not attempt to prove some of the things in the Bible with science, um, but I think that you're barking up the wrong tree. I don't think that it's necessary or even necessarily an overall in the big picture a good idea. And I'll tell you the reason why. Because let's say, for instance, the story of creation, the very beginning, and God created Adam and Eve. There is a very good friend of mine, Father Xavier. He used to be my theology teacher at high school. He was Brother Xavier back then. He made a video, which I will find and I'll post it down below in the description. He made a video where he analyzed the first few verses of the Bible, the creation story, and he says something very interesting. I don't have the Bible in front of me, and I'm not one to likes quoting scripture um, very much, but there are 7 days, of course, where the creation takes place, and what he explains in that video is that each line, each creation, um, the first day he created the heavens and the earth, and then he separated light, that each one of those was also a response to, in other words, there was a God in the culture that they were in the world that they were in, there was a God associated with that day, a pagan God. And so this was the writers of Genesis, their attempt to replace those gods with the one God. And so there would have been a different God maybe for darkness, a different God maybe for nature, for trees, another God maybe for animals. And that was the point of setting it up that way. I know that in Hebrew, the name of the first book, Genesis, is Bereshith, I believe. Genesis is the Greek name, and it means well, I don't know about Genesis, but I know Bereshit means in the beginning. I'm assuming that Genesis means the same thing or something similar. Um, but the point is that, and I use this analogy with other things. For instance, one of Aesop's fables is let's see, the tortoise and the hare. I think that's one of the fables, right? And that there's a moral lesson to it, and the moral lesson, of course, is that taking your time doing it is much more effective than just running through things, right? That you'll end up winning in the end if you do it consistently and methodically. Um, and I would say, well, here's a news flash for you. There wasn't a real hare or a real turtle, but that doesn't take away from the truth of the story, the truth of the moral point of the story. And in the opening of Genesis, we believe that God created the heavens and the earth, and then it goes through the days, and each one of those is meant to be put, of course, also to um, replace a God that was around at the time, but also there's an order to it. First comes the heavens and the earth, and then there was light and darkness, and then it goes on in progression until he creates, and that is actually also the way that um, the universe came into existence, and then the earth came into existence. It's in that order. Now, if you were to try to say, and this is why we have such divisions among Christians, if you were to try to say that that actually happened, and you were trying to make it scientific, and there's, of course, a movement among some Christians, which is called creationism, and they try to, what my argument would be, they try to put a square peg in a round hole. They have to do away with all these scientific discoveries that we've found, with dinosaurs and um, different periods, in the development of the Earth, where there were single cell animals, and then there were, animals that went from the oceans onto the land, and we have fossil history that kind of tells us where everything was, which, among them there seems to be a problem. Um, but I'll get that maybe into another video. But and then there's also the dating, and a lot of these discoveries lead us to progress in other things. Discoveries in science and medicine. I remember that at one time I heard that because we went to outer space, now they go into space and they do certain experiments to create certain things in a zero gravity environment that now help us down, here on Earth with technology, like for example, making microchips or in medical science. And so there was a time in church history, and it was right around the time of Galileo, where in the Catholic Church, which was the biggest church at the time, it's been this way for forever, that there were two wings, and one of them took the Bible literally, and the other one didn't. The other one would take some things, literally, like there was a certain guy named Moses, maybe, and there was a certain guy named Abraham, and there were, sons and family, and there's um, a family tree. um, there's also the birth of Christ, but some things are not meant to be taken literally, and some of them I just don't know. And in the church, you're not held to believe them. Certain things you are. The most glaring one is, of course, the Eucharist. The transformation of the bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ. We are called to believe that literally. It's a pretty big one. But a lot of the other ones, we don't have to take them as if they actually happened. And there have been some research where they haven't found, for instance, evidence of a kingdom that may have been there, or that something happened, an earthquake or something. There wasn't evidence of that, and it's like, fine, I wasn't held to believe that in the first place, and so I'm more interested in the moral teaching. I'm more interested in the belief that God revealed Himself and He passed down a moral code to His people, to us humans, everyone. That seems more what I'm interested in, and I think that's also more productive, and it's it teaches us other things both on a macro level as the entire world and on a personal level. Every one of us individually has some sort of relationship with God, even if it's a non-relationship, a rejection. Something that happened very interesting. My previous video, I talked about atheists. There's a psychologist. His name is Dr. It starts with a P, I think, Fitz. It's a very short name. I think there's a Z in there somewhere. Also, if I find it, I'll put the link. And he went back. He's a convert to Catholicism. And he went back and he looked into famous atheists in history. And he found something that I kind of assumed, but that these famous atheists in history, and I'm thinking like Freud and Nietzsche, all of them had, and this is not across the board, but most of them had what he would call defective fathers, either the fathers that weren't around, or fathers that their sons didn't see them as strong and as supportive, maybe even hated, maybe they were abusive. And in rejecting their earthly father once they became adults, or even before they became adults, they rejected a heavenly father, a metaphysical father. And then that makes sense. Psychologically, that kind of makes sense. I know people that I in my life that I've seen who had very poor relationship with their fathers. They didn't respect them, and they're atheists. It's funny that women, it's something different. He said that women that have defective fathers or fathers that they weren't close to, um, a lot of them will become this spiritual, or they'll adhere to like a mother goddess. And it's interesting because um, the belief in God and a Christian God is, of course, a Western thing. God revealed himself in Mesopotamia, somewhere in there. And this was carried across and went through Europe, and Europe became the dominant uh, force in the world and went around and did the trades and influenced the world incredibly. I can imagine what would have happened if the missionaries that went to Japan and China hadn't been kicked out, if the leaders at the time would have accepted them. Where would the world be today? I mean, it would be very, interesting that we would have, China has over 1 billion people. Um, what would have happened? Anyway, um, back to the original point. Um, if you want to make some sort of an argument for God that's scientific, I don't think it's a good idea. I think that quite easily some of these items in the Bible that you believe prove, or that you believe, um, and can be disproven, really hurts Christianity overall. Um, and this was not the case that was held throughout the history of the church. There was a very distinct separation. Although the church encouraged a lot of scientific research, and there were things that they opposed as heretical, and some of those are they're very complicated. The Galileo uh, situation, people think one thing. When you read it, it's really something different. It was more a political thing, um, you know, and so when you try to disprove it and saying, well, the church convicted him of heresy because he said something. When you look at the whole thing, it's not quite the way that people believe it. Also, the when something is disproven and scientifically, uh, people have to make a choice between the science and their faith, and um, if or they think that they do, and that isn't healthy. I mean, I would rather that people keep them separate. Uh, is there some overlap? Absolutely, there's some overlap. Absolutely, but to use one to prove the other, I don't think is a healthy thing. Um, there was one last point that I was going to make, and it's about um, I think it's about atheism and faith. Um, One of the things that I mentioned in the other video was about atheists and their arguments that they make. Now, I'm saying this, and I want to say this respectfully, um, but I believe that the vast majority of atheists are atheists because they think it makes them sound smart. And they think makes them sound smart because a lot of Christians, and this is across the spectrum, sometimes say very uninformed things, or things that haven't been thought through. When you try to prove God, or something that happened through the Bible, you're going to get into trouble. And so I don't do that. I have actually um, a thing, something that I do, and I use this across the board with a lot of things in my life. Politics and religion, of course, is I try to seek the truth wherever I find it. I remember a great quote by somebody who seems to have fallen out of favor with these recent years, the Dalai Lama. He was asked once, what if it was argued or it was proven that reincarnation was not true? And he says, well, then we would stop teaching it. That's very fair. If we find something isn't true, then we won't teach it. There are certain things in the Catholic Church, miracles that are uh, um, acknowledged by the church, and they do a lot of research, from what I understand, and they try to prove that it's not true. And if they there's something called the devil's advocate that argues against the canonization of someone, for instance, when they're trying to prove miracles, and they try to prove that it's not true. And if they find that there's a flaw, then no sainthood. That's it. But they do try to find the truth, and sometimes we're left with something that we can't find the evidence for, and science can't answer it. In fact, science would say the opposite thing. If anyone gets a chance, and there are videos about this, and this is something that I just find extraordinary, is the miracle of the sun during Fatima, the children that saw the Virgin Mary, and there was a time when all these people showed up, and they all saw something extraordinary, and some of it is actually documented on film. Now, the way that things are, I mean, I don't know how much that, um, the footage, how good it is, and I've seen it, but it's nothing that I find very impressive. But a lot of people were there, and a lot of people saw something happen, and they were moved. And some of them, people that dissuade or argue against will always say, "Well, it was a bunch of dumb peasants that uneducated and superstitious." But that wasn't the case. I mean, there were a lot of people that were educated, some people that were not believers that were there to disprove it, and they saw something, you know. And then the argument that goes that I found people that criticize it will argue it was a mass delusion, or the sun setting dried them all off, and so it wasn't anything extraordinary. I don't know. I wasn't there. Um, some of the things that happened or that were claimed to have happened, I find very, very interesting. Sometimes, and I look at how they're consistent with my faith. So I think I've got to get to church in a little bit, so I'll stop it there. And Phil, if you see this message or see this video and you want to comment, I would encourage you to do so, and I would be interested in a dialogue or your rebuttal. Anyway, thank you to everyone for watching. I think that I have a subscribe button that popped up at the beginning of this video. I think I figured out how to do it. If it is, please subscribe, comment, and give me a thumbs up. And if it doesn't appear at all, just hit the button normally and subscribe to my channel. Thank you, and have a great day.